So welcome everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the CEO and founder of DNA Behavior. And today I'm delighted to be doing another one of our identity EQ interviews, or I really would call it a conversation. And I've got with me Shelley Row, who is the CEO and founder of Blue Fjord Leaders. And I think Shelley will tell us why the name Blue Fjord is so important soon. And she's done a lot of work over the last 10 years, and we've collaborated together on helping engineers move beyond the data and not just be pegging themselves as technocrats, but also as human leaders. So Shelley, it's great to be with you today. And
it's wonderful to be here, Hugh. Thank you so much for having me.
So you've got a very rich story. So why don't we just start off with, you telling me a little bit about your career and how you've got to this place of Blue Fjord Leaders.
Well, thanks for asking, Hugh. I am an engineer by training, and that's where I've spent the vast majority of my career. And it actually started, my dad was in the Air Force. So he came from a military background, and he was a very strict disciplinarian, and he valued problem solving and logic and rational thought. And he would always say, crying doesn't solve anything. So we grew up, with that very rational approach. And it worked great for me. I went through the engineering school that was just right up their alley. I started in the work world. It went great for the first few years. And then I started moving up into management positions. And the more I was in management and working with leading people, the issues were becoming more and more complex. I was working with higher level leaders. The more it didn't work. It just didn't work anymore. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't being as effective as I thought I could be, why I wasn't moving up in my career like I had been. And I really couldn't understand what was going on. And I finally, I just remember it. I went to a counselor actually for a personal issue. And she said to me, she said, she asked me why I was there. And I said, well, I don't really know why I'm here. I can't think of anything that's wrong. And she said, well, I'm not interested in what you think. I want to know how you feel. And I said to her, how I feel? I'm going to need to think about that. And so it was the first time that I began, Hugh, to understand that there was a whole nother dimension, right? And I had to learn that there was a feeling side to people, right? It seems silly to say it now, but I had to actually learn it and then learn that it holds a lot of value. And that was the turning point. Once I began to integrate the thinking part with the feeling part, it opened up my skills. It opened up my management. It allowed me to move up into leadership. And that's what I'm passionate about today, is to help others, particularly those that are kind of stuck like me, to bring the two pieces together, because that's what makes powerful management and powerful leadership. It's what makes us powerful people.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to, grow up in an environment of, dealing with numbers, rationality, solving problems logically, looking at the bottom line, looking at your remuneration, how much money did I make? Is that important? What were the sales results inside the business? When I was a chartered accountant, how many chargeable hours was I billing every day? What was my team billing? And that was really what was important. And I was seen as good if I achieved those metrics. Mm-hmm. But I think, as you say, there's another whole side of it in terms of, were the people all around you happy? Are you able to influence the people up the chain? Yes. Coming to make a decision, do you just make a decision based on numbers? Or do you bring the human element in there and even your own intuition? And, and I know you're doing a lot of, you're an engineer and you're doing a lot of work with engineers, allowing your intuition in there. And as you said, what feels right. Mm-hmm. Is so important.
Yeah, I do work with a lot of engineers, and they get very frustrated. And I was one of them. You would have a set of data and you'd bring it to a top level decision maker, and then they would make a decision that was counter to what the data would indicate. And the engineers would get very frustrated. And what I had to learn and what I help them learn now is that decision maker is considering not only the data, but they're considering a lot of other factors. And a lot of them aren't necessarily quantifiable in numbers terms, but they are, and particularly when you're at very senior levels of leadership, and particularly in the public sector where it's political leadership, they are factoring in, how is this going to play? How is this going to resonate? How will my constituents feel about it? And that information is data. It's just data of a different sort.
And those leaders above the engineers, so the engineers are bringing the data to the table and saying the data says to do X. And these leaders up the chain, what kind of people were they? Were they engineers themselves, or they come from different disciplines?
Yeah, they tended to come, some of them were engineers. Many would come from different disciplines. And so that's the other thing that we see with any kind of technical professional, is that they're going, at some point, if they're going up in their careers, they're going to be working for someone who is either not technical, their client is going to be not technical, or they are working for someone who is an engineer, in my example, but that leadership person who is an engineer, they've learned this. They've learned that it is not just about the data, and they have learned how to work with the people issues. So I talk about with my clients how to bridge the gap, and I help them understand the magnitude of the gap. We start out here with that logic problem solving, but management skills are up here with delegation, motivation, collaboration, dealing with difficult people. And the gap in the middle is pretty big. And in my research that I've done, Hugh, in fact, this is kind of interesting. I've identified 3 competencies that are absolutely necessary to bridge the gap from technical person into management. There's self-awareness, awareness of others, empathy comes up a lot, and interpersonal communication skills. And so if you don't have that foundation, then you literally cannot do those higher level management skills like motivation, collaboration, mentoring, decision making. And the thing that, just to tie it up with the work that you have done, is I use the DNA behavior tool to help clients and engineers in particular understand more about themselves and begin to understand and own that kind of logical approach they have. And I use it very effectively to help them understand other people. And I have little tactical things that indicate the different quadrants, like in your communication DNA tool, so that they are able to go, oh, that's a lifestyle person. Oh, that's a goal setting person. And while those are labels, and we're very careful about the labels, it's helpful for them to understand, I need to adapt my style to their style in this way. So it's been a very, very effective tool for me in working with my clients.
Because I think understanding yourself it's clearly the first step. And
Absolutely.
that's very important, getting in touch with your intuition, how you wired, why, if you're a risk taker, why you're taking risks, how you're managing them, or if you're cautious or you're creative. Some people are very creative, but they don't understand why their bosses don't want to hear about a new idea.
That's right.
And just want them to execute. Some people are great at talking, but they talk too much, or others don't talk enough. But I think understanding yourself is clearly an important step, and that's starts to become the launch pad to understanding others. But the real game is in starting to understand others and building the interpersonal skills. As a leader, managing differences, I think that's the hardest thing of all to do. But it can be helped if you have a framework of understanding, acceptance, and respect, which is really what you're talking about. But I think, Shelley, what I want to bring out, and I think you were using this word a lot there, which is important, is learned. We all have a natural wiring, but we can learn to do it.
Yeah.
So some of those senior leaders that you experienced and still see, who have sort of made it across the Grand Canyon, if you want to call it, they've got from one side to the other with that big gulf there. They've learned to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what you're about is, it's great to produce the right data. Even that's hard to produce. That's important.
Yes.
But what I've been seeing as a leader, and, last year I'm on the board of an organization and we had to make some pretty big decisions, and you can make them very data orientated, but there's got to be compassion somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers will tell you one part of what to do, but I think compassion and the humanness and understanding the dynamics of your customer base, stakeholders, community is also important, because if it was only a data-driven decision, it might be okay for a little while, but you might blow up the rest of your business.
That's exactly right.
What that line is, that's experience. I think it's the people skills, but I think that's a lot of what you're bringing together. How does it? So Shelley, how does that translate out with Blue Fjord? Because I think there's a good story to connect there with that.
Yes, and I'm very proud of my new logo. You can see it on the back wall. And it came about from my personal philosophy and from the story that I shared with you. Because if you've visited fjords, and those are all fjords on the back wall, by the way, the big one is Norway, this is Scotland, and the other one is New Zealand. And when you go to a fjord, you're just struck by the power. The power of the landscape is so compelling. And the reason it's so powerful is because the way that the land and the water intertwine. Well, in some traditions, land and mountains represent the power of intellect, while water represents the equal power of feeling and emotion. And so in a fjord, you have the two intertwine in a powerful way. It is my belief and my experience that the best leaders, the best managers, and the best individual person we can be is that similar intertwining between how we think and how we feel. And so that it is that philosophy that I bring into the training. Now, I don't necessarily always lead with that because it's not necessarily the most easily received with my particular audience, but it's always well received with leadership because they've had to learn it and they know that that's what it's going to take to be successful in a leadership position.
Because in a way, you dealt the hand of the structure that's there, and that's the the mountains and the land masses that are there, the Rocky Mountains, if you want to call it that. But the riverways and the waterways are the flow, the intuitive flow, right. And you've got to be careful because, as you said, they're both equally powerful. You just can't swim against the water forever. You're going to get very tired and lose energy. You've got to somewhere work out how you go with that flow, and manage them together, and they are integrated, and that's where, at the end of the day, people and numbers are integrated. We talk about results and relationships. They're integrated.
And the other thing too, Hugh, that I'm very careful with, particularly with technical people who value data so much, they sometimes will hear what I'm saying as go with your gut. And I'm not saying that. What I try to teach is the skilled understanding of both and the skilled integration of both. You can't just go with the numbers in many cases, nor can you just go blindly with gut feel. Yep. It is that informed understanding of what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And again, I've been had very good use with some of the DNA behavior tools in helping people understand what is the nature of that, maybe that nagging feeling. I talk a lot about having that little nagging feeling. Where is that coming from? And a lot of times you can trace it back to something that you can actually see in your profile. So it helps them make it more tangible to use a tool to understand the behavior.
And I'm glad you said that, because I think that it is easy as a substitute for saying, well, don't just look after deal with the numbers, but follow your gut. I think that can leave you making some very bad mistakes.
Absolutely.
If you've done no analysis or checking of that. And
That's
where
right.
is that coming from? And I think that's why we often say, check yourself before you wreck yourself. But if you've got the intuitive feeling, I think what we're saying is explore it.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
find out what's going on. And is it just monkey speak in your head, or is there something real going on, and what is it? And I've learned a little bit. Sometimes time tells you the answer.
That's true.
Very often, I get the intuitive gut feeling something's not right here, and I'm a numbers person like all these engineers. I'm an accountant, just like you are. I'm a reformed accountant. But sometimes just a little bit of time and looking around, I get the answer.
That's right.
And I think he's using your gut to be alert and take a look at what are the other people feeling, sensing, listening to messages, maybe read another research report somewhere else and something different.
Yeah.
What other decisions were made, and then it helps you bring it all together.
And Hugh, an analogy that I use a lot with my groups is about a car. And if something goes wrong under the hood of the car, it communicates that to you with a check engine light. So that little feeling we get, that little discomfort, something's not sitting right, it just doesn't feel right. That's the check engine light.
Yep.
Your own internal check engine light has gone on, but just like in the car, check engine doesn't tell you anything about what's wrong with the car. You have to actually get under the hood and dig into it to understand, why did the check engine light come on? It's the same with us. When we get that little feeling that's uncomfortable, we've got to go inside, do some digging around to understand why am I feeling uncomfortable about this? Sometimes it's a really valid message we need to pay attention to. And sometimes it's just leading us astray. And we need to have the skill to be able to discern it and know the difference.
And so what I'm also picking up, Shelley, if we just start to center this a little bit on you as a leader of these leaders and engineering leaders and technical leaders, is you're very good at crafting stories that an engineer is going to understand, like talking about a car, talking about, land masses and riverways and fjords, is something that, an engineer, depending on what type of engineer they are, but generally speaking, they would relate to that.
Yeah.
So I imagine that, one of your talents is, because I know you do a lot of speaking, is, you're communicating the stories for them in a very tangible way. They're not fluffy stories.
No, they're not fluffy stories. No, I draw a lot of the stories from my experience and things that, and it's usually things that have gone wrong, things that I blew up or, put my foot in my mouth or whatever it was, and stuff that just didn't go well. And in hindsight, now I'm able to unravel it and understand it in a different way. So those are all stories that, they tend to stick with people. I actually do a program on storytelling, particularly for engineers and technical people who tend to resonate more with numbers, because here's the problem. They've all had the experience of going to some decision maker with their numbers and it doesn't work, like we talked about before. However, if they're able to think about how does the problem feel? How does the solution feel? And weave a little bit of that kind of story into their analytical framework, then it goes a lot better. What I tell them is that the statistics are not the story. The statistics support the story. And so we try to help them learn how to pull the story out of the work that they do. Because, I grew up in the transportation world, and it's all story. The work that transportation engineers do impact our lives every single day. And they tend to put numbers.
Because I think you're talking music to my ears, because the story, everyone says you got to tell a story. Well, that's great. But the story can't just be fluff. it's got to be a tangible element in there, but there's also got to be an emotional element.
That's right.
And I think that's what you're bringing out is you nevertheless, the tangible element, yes, is the numbers, but there's a feelings part, there's an emotional element. What really happened? How did the people feel? What was going on needs to be brought out.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, that's the part that people will connect to. But also, in you telling your own stories, you're showing them what an authentic leader is. I made a mistake. That's not an easy thing for an engineer or an accountant to say that they did, right? And sometimes we're trained not to say to people we made a mistake. But you know, the fact of life is we all do.
We do.
And you're bringing that out. So if I pull that together and said, Shelley, what do you believe is your standout talent? You know, what is your 10 out of 10 gift? We all have, you know, each of us has a 10 out of 10 somewhere. And we have some 8 out of 10s and we have some 2 out of 10s. But I'm just sort of really interested in, you know, what you would call your standout talent.
I would say that there are several that kind of come together to make a unique package because we're all a unique package. I'm very much a big picture thinker. I just naturally gravitate to the big picture. I connect the dots. I'm very good at seeing pieces of information and connecting the dots and telling the story. I like to go deep. Right, so I want to get under the hood and understand what's really the source of the situation, what's really the source of the problem, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And I'm very goal driven. So when you pull all those things together, it does create a certain kind of persona that's, you know, kind of vision, big picture, how are we going to get there, logical, goal setting driven. And then I have to say that communication skills has been one of the things that helped me a ton in my career. Because it's not necessarily something that stands out with a room full of engineers, but being able to write well, speak well, present well, to tell a story, to listen well, that little bundle of communication skills also has been a game changer. And that, to your previous point, did not come naturally.
But you've worked at that.
Yeah.
But you have but at the same time you have a lot of raw material to do that. I mean, if we talk your business DNA style of being an initiator, you're inherently goal driven, visionary, you know, competitive. Yeah, big picture.
Yep. Yeah. You do not want me doing anything with details. It would not be a good plan.
No, but I don't think you like rubbery plans either, you know,
That's right.
So, but what you want people to do is to, you know, if we take those as your strength, you know, you're very much, you know, goal-driven, pioneering, pushing forward person. You want to see organizations transformed. You want to see the engineers go, you know, and that's going to happen. The engineers have got to go beyond the data to the human side. And, you know, but I think that's the business DNA part for you there, that I imagine just knowing that and seeing that's helped to some degree in.
It totally does. When I originally took it, I was like, wow, how did they know? How did they know this? It's a little scary. It was so right on the money. The other little, I guess 2 little anecdotes, and I use this in my training that came from the business DNA. One of the things I found on there in the performance environment keys is that I like to have updates. You know, I need to know kind of how we're progressing. And I read that, I'm like, oh, that is so helpful, because I've been accused of being a micromanager. And I was like, but I don't really want to do it. I don't want to guide how it's done. All I want to know is, where are we? So it was very insightful to validate, oh, I see that now. And the other one, I score very low on ability to empathetically listen. And I got that. And I'm like, well, I just don't think that's right. I've worked on that my entire career. And there it was. This tool helps us have insight into our natural behavior, not necessarily the learned behavior. And I have worked it my entire career. And so now it's relatively built in to my behavior, but it certainly didn't start out that way. And I still am not as good at listening when I'm frustrated, tired, or very upset.
And that really brings out the natural behavior, doesn't it? That when you're under extreme pressure, you will inadvertently just revert back to it.
Right.
That's the default. But being aware that you are going to do it or might do it, might say, you know what, I'm not going to be around people for a little while till I get some food, till I have sleep. I'm not going to send that email that I've just written out of anger. You can, that's to check yourself before you wreck yourself. You can slow yourself down and pull yourself into line and say, okay, maybe I need to go circle back around and listen again before I make a decision.
That's right. And one thing, Hugh, that I didn't mention before is I've studied neuroscience. And so I bring that neuroscience foundation into the work. And again, particularly with technical people, logical people like engineers, having the science foundation has been a real game changer. The neuroscience paired with the DNA behavior tool has been so powerful. And I have, clients who can take that tool and they can look at it. And when they have a situation that is contrary to their natural talents, that's when it upsets them. And they're able to see that, they are able to experience it, and they know now why it's troublesome, why that person annoys them. It's because they're completely different in their communication style.
And I think that people don't understand how important the communication style is to building trust in the relationship, because if you're communicated with the wrong way, like for me, if I don't get given options when I'm making a decision, 80% of the time I'm not going to make the decision. And if I do and step outside that boundary, I make a mistake.
Yeah.
But I will also, or I'll fiddle around with it and take a long time to make the decision. But most people around me who know me well know if you give me the options with a risk and reward in there, I will make a pretty quick decision. And it's not always the low cost decision either. It can be often it's the high price, high value item I go for. I just want to know, I think that the research has been done.
Yeah.
What's the best way to go for it? Which way to go? Because cheap isn't always best. It might be expedient, but I think if the thing is if when we learn those for each of us and the people we interact with, we can go a long way, because really that's the decision, that's the blockage to decision making.
That's right.
And then ultimately people don't feel understood, accepted, or respected in the workplace. And I think I've always seen if the communication's poor, you're on a 6-month spiral downwards to somebody exiting, getting fired, whatever, or a loss of some sort. A tragedy, really, that didn't need to happen.
Yeah. And Hugh, the thing that I see the most often with the group of people I tend to work with is a rub with the communication style. And many of the people who have risen up into leadership ranks in these kinds of technically oriented organizations tend to have a very direct communication style. And I can see it on their profile, on the section where we get the percentages. I can see that very, very strong behavioral tendency that's hard to pull back.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of problem in their organization, and they alienate a lot of people unintentionally, and they don't know why, because we've got somebody else who is a very soft people person, feeling in their nature, and don't do heavy duty in your face communication. And that leader sees that person as weak, and that person who's highly valued sees the leader as a bully.
Yep.
And it's just a difference in the communication style. And when we can bring them together and help them understand that it's simply a difference in communication style, and to release the judgment around it, often, not all the time, but often we can resolve the conflict within the organization. And now we get to benefit from the two different styles in the organization.
I think that's right. If you get to that earlier than later, you've got a chance of solving the problem. I think if it goes on for too long and somebody makes, a bad decision, a very bad decision, or acts in an untrustworthy way behind the scenes, once trust is breached in certain levels, it's hard to get back.
I agree with that.
But I think that's right. So, Shelley, just as we sort of move forward here in terms of your identity and greatest strategic impact on the people you work with, you talk to a lot of people, in your presentations, you're coaching and training and developing a lot of leaders. What do you see as that your most powerful strategic impact on them or for them?
I would say that the thing that makes my day is when I have a group or an individual person and they're technically oriented and they go, wow, I never understood how valuable feelings were.
Yeah.
Wow, there it is. I had a group, I'm a trainer for a transportation engineering group. They do a leadership program every year. And in the last class, I do a session where I say, so I need for you to write down and tell me, what is your biggest takeaway from the program? And person after person after person would tell me, I didn't appreciate the value and the relevance of our feelings in the workplace. I've always been taught there's no place for feelings at work. So when I get that kind of aha moment and I can help them open up that whole dimension in themselves and in seeing it in the workplace, then it just doesn't get much better than that, Hugh.
So really, in a way, it's bringing feelings to engineering data at the end of the day, is which is what then transforms the leader.
It is.
But I think there was a component that came up before, Shelley, that's important, is your ability to tell relevant stories, to actually get them to see it.
That's true.
Because you can just say that. You could write that out in one sentence.
Yeah.
The human element's important, and guys, you've got to get on, get in the game. But I think the transformation is coming from the stories. Understanding the difference between the landmass and the river flow, and the river flow being also bringing the neuroscience part into it, because that's the dynamic piece.
Yeah.
But I was sensing it's the stories is really a big part of you.
I would say it's two things, Hugh. The stories, and again, the neuroscience, we know that stories stick better in the brain, so they tend to be more memorable. I'll have people come up to me years later and they'll say, I still remember that story you told. So I use the stories to help connect with them and be memorable. So that's one piece of it. The other thing that has been a real game changer is that, whatever it is I'm teaching, whether it's listening skills or communicating with a difficult person, whatever that skill is that we're developing, yes, there's a story element, and then they apply it. So in the class, we do an application exercise. Sometimes they're tactile. Like I have them build a little box and put that difficult person in the box. We seal it shut and we write the label, the judgment, on the top of the box. And it feels awful. And the only way they get to let their person out of the box is they have to become curious about that person.
Yeah.
They have to become curious about what motivates them. And then they're able to let them out of the box. So those kinds of application exercises also help them take the learning and actually put it into practice in their own life, even if they're just thinking about it. And that's become the 1-2 punch: stories and application. And that's what equals memory and learning.
Because I think by doing that, if they take that exercise away, they'll be able to do it with their teams. It's a simple exercise, whether it's in a review meeting or something's just gone wrong.
Yes.
They'll be able to talk about it. And importantly, also, they'll be able to take it home as well and do it at home, because, you know, if you're naturally wired up as a data person, it's probably going to come out at home, and that may not be the best thing either. So
That's right.
in every setting. So, you know, really, Shelley, you're having a lot of impact with people through the art of storytelling and getting them to move from data to feelings. And then, as you say, bringing the application of it along with easy to do exercises in a lot of ways. So as we wrap up here, have you got any other tips for the listeners out there who might hear this podcast or this recording?
I think I don't know, tips. So I think the thing that that has been so valuable to me is I'm just a big believer in rigorous self-awareness, and really self-examining all the time. It was not it's not a one-time thing. I had a difficult situation earlier in this week, and I spent all yesterday going, okay, what was going on with that? What can I learn from that? Let's look at it and see, what we can learn and how can we grow from that experience. And it's made a big difference. The other thing I think that's been a huge game changer for me is living intentionally, having very clear intentionality about my work, about what I want in my life, all of those things. And the last thing that I have it literally stuck here on my wall, so I see it every day, and I've read it somewhere and I don't remember anymore. But I believe, that to live that highest vision of ourselves, we've got to, first of all, be intent on what it is. I ask for it every day. I do all I can to achieve it. And then I release the outcome.
Yeah.
Ask, do, release is what I have written on my board. Ask for what I want, do all I can, and release the outcome. And that has been huge.
And I think that it's both those. It's the intentionality, asking for it, and then the releasing really shows how integrated you've become, which is, at the end of the day, is what we're talking about, isn't it? Is integrating the results side of ourselves with the relational side, being forgiving of ourselves at times as well, and knowing that the ultimate decision may not always be perfect in terms of numbers, but if it's got a fair balance of the human side in it, that's going to be the long-term winner.
That's right. That's right.
So thank you, Shelley. It's been fantastic spending time with you.